Yeah. So we will go ahead and get started. Full house tonight, everybody. All right. So I'm going to call to order. Today is Monday, June 17th, 2024. And I'm calling to order the Board of Finance for the City of Burlington. It is 5:32 p.m. And our first item tonight is the agenda. And we'll look to see if there's a motion on the agenda. So moved by Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Kane. Is there any discussion on the item before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Our second item is our public forum. And as a practice of the Board of Finance to first look to folks in the room who would like to address the board before we go online. And depending on how many people we have tonight, I usually suggest about 2 minutes or so. So I will kindly time you. So I see one person who's interested. Is there anyone else interested in the room tonight on public forum? Oh, look at me tonight. This is great. Usually everyone doesn't make eye contact. I think you're all alive over there. Okay, good. So let's invite you on up, and if you want to introduce yourself. Do I sit? You can sit anywhere you like, kind of informal. Let's start the timer for you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor Mulvaney-Stanek. I'm Liz Gamache. I am from United Way of Northwest Vermont. And we run the Working Bridges program, which has been delivered over the last year here to the City of Burlington employees. And the reason I'm here is we recently received notice that the contract would not be renewed on July 1st. And I'm asking you to reconsider a recommendation to put that forward. In short, Working Bridges is a service that provides an on-site resource coordinator that helps to promote job and financial stability for employees. It's available to employees, all employees, but it's particularly important to employees at the lower end of the wage scale who may be faced with issues of scarcity. The resource coordinators build relationships and provide connections to resources like transportation, housing, childcare, elder care, and much, much more. It's been a challenging year, but it has been a good year for us here with the city. We've been able to work directly with about 40 employees. And we've done this during a year of transition with administration transition, HR transition, and then construction that made it really difficult for employees to access the site where the Working Bridges resource coordinator was. But despite that, we've served 40 employees and are building momentum. And so that's why we ask you to consider maintaining it in the budget, maintain the investment that you've already made in Working Bridges and the momentum that's building by continuing the contract for another year. And that is it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else in the room before I go online who'd like to address the board for public comment? Okay, seeing none, let's go online. Is there anyone online? Oh, there's the timer. It's under 2 minutes, well done. Former Councilor, City Councilor Sharon Busher, the floor is yours. Good evening.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Hopefully that room is cool because it's warm.
It is.
I sent my questions in advance to the mayor and to Catherine and to Chapin. I had something that bounced back and I tried to send something to Megan Moyer, but the focus of my questions have to do with the reclassifications from the various departments. And one of them came from Parks and Rec, which was the park ranger, and it had the information that I thought was useful when I'm trying to see what the total cost is as we adequately compensate employees, but what does that mean for our total budget? And so what the park ranger had was the current step and compensation, the proposed step and compensation, and that difference, what that difference would be. And ideally, what is submitted would say how that money is going to be found. Like sometimes there would have been an elimination of a position or et cetera. And so I think that you saw that in the IT presentation. So with DPW, I was looking for that same information with the street maintenance workers who have a new name, and with the right of way. And also, and Chapin was kind enough, the Director of Public Works was kind enough to get back to me and provide me with some answers to some of my questions. And the other piece was that in the water and wastewater, I wasn't quite sure how that total department, what the number of employees are right now and what the number of employees will be, because they've inherited 3 street maintenance workers. And then there's also the creation of a new management position. So to me, that would have been useful, and what the ultimate cost was. I realize it's going to be the ratepayer that's going to pay for this. But I was looking to understand really the whole financial picture. And Megan did not get this email because it, as I said, it bounced back. So I'm not trying to put her on the spot at all. And I apologize that if you didn't get this question in advance, I just think it would be useful information and could be submitted at another time unless the board feels differently. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon. Is there anyone else online that would like to take part in public forum? Seeing none, I'm going to close public forum and we'll move on to our next item, which is our consent agenda. And I will look to the board for a motion on our consent agenda. So moved by Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Kane. Is there any discussion on our consent agenda before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving right along to our first deliberative item, which is item 4.1, which is the first of a series of reclassifications that we'll be taking up tonight. So the first one is from our Parks Department. So Parks folks want to come on up. This is a reclassification of one position, the lead urban park ranger, which is within our Department of Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront. So if you want to introduce yourself to the board and anyone else you brought with you, and I'll let you take it away.
Sure. So Cindy White, Director of Parks, Recreation, Waterfront, and if there's any HR questions, or Hannah, who's on the cusp of an amazing vacation, is behind. So be kind to her because she's getting ready to, or I guess maybe not kind, because you're getting ready to be away for a month and you can relax after. But it's always kind of so we have in front of you tonight, it's a reclassification of our lead urban park ranger position. This is something that's been in the works for quite a while. I think folks understand the value of the rangers out in the field. They've been doing really amazing work. And the reason that we're doing retro pay so far back is, I went back and I looked at our emails and to see, when did the complexities of working so carefully with the unhoused out in the parks, which was like barely it was half of a bullet point of the original job description, and it started right off the bat. So we felt like it was really fair for the complexity of the work that had become to look that far back for the retro pay. The complexities of the work definitely has been different than we anticipated, but we're fortunate enough to have the hires that we're able to work with in a very successful way with folks out in the parks.
Are there comments or questions from the board? Councilor Carpenter?
It's not so much about this position specifically, because I acknowledge the extra work and we got to deal with it. It's more my comment around hoping that we're going to look at the universe of city staff to support, particularly support the in-house. And I know that's on your agenda, and so I just want to make sure that this decision doesn't complicate things. Understanding that you've got a lot to look at.
I'll take that question. It's a neat comment just to respond to. So it is very, as I've said before, many public meetings, we need to do a better job of coordination integrated across departments. There is so many things that are kind of merging here around a good conversation in the city around how do we do community safety? How do we support specifically folks around house? How do we look at our current structures that are quite siloed right now? We've built up in various ways, different ways to respond, and it's confusing at certain points along the way around who's responding, who's enforcing, who is interfacing with people on behalf of the city. So that is the conversation this year. I think for this reclassification, for right now, this has been on hold for several months now. So this is a bit of unfinished business to existing staff who've been really evolving this role and responding to things that no one had any control over, frankly, to respond to what our city is facing. So to me, this is a piece of it, but the larger conversation is ahead of us truly on how we deliver this kind of service from the city, and then more importantly, structurally, how do we do this in a way that is efficient, makes sense, and it's using best practices most importantly.
Okay, and that's really just what I want to
Yep.
acknowledge. As I said, it's not specifically about this, but
Yep.
acknowledging that in the going forward, we need to figure that out a little bit.
Totally agree. Thank you. Are there other comments or questions from the board? Councilor Travers?
Yeah, just a couple questions. One is, has the union approved of the reclassification request and the retro pay?
They definitely approved of the reclassification.
Okay.
Yes, I got to ask yes for you, thank you.
It's getting into the weeds a little bit, but because the job description appears now, it appears to be a supervisory position. I guess I'm wondering, is it a supervisor position?
It's a lead park ranger, so it functions similar to our working foreperson roles.
Okay. That's fine.
Thank you, Councilor. Anything else? Okay, then I will look for a motion. Everyone's ready to make that this item? Ready? We're not going to read all the items tonight. There's one in particular that we're just in case anyone's having anxiety. So we'll prompt them which one get to it. But we are going to be listening.
See 4.5. We're at 4.1 now.
Exciting. It's going to be okay. We're on 4.1.
I would move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the reclassification of the lead urban park ranger, a regular full-time non-exempt AFSCME grade 16 position to a regular full-time non-exempt AFSCME grade 17 position in the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront, and further authorized back pay in the amount of $9,196.86 to the incumbent, retroactive to May 16, 2022.
Thank you, Councilor. Is there a second? Councilor Kane, thank you. A second. Any further discussion before we take our vote? Okay, I'm ready to vote. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you.
Cindy. Appreciate it. Moving on to item 4.2, which is innovation and technology position changes with our IT department. Welcome, Scott. You want to introduce yourself and give us a brief overview?
Sure. Scott Barker, the Chief Innovation Officer for the City of Burlington. And I'm here tonight to talk about closing 2 positions and opening a cybersecurity position to prepare and better position the city in its cybersecurity stance. So, questions?
Questions or comments from the board?
It's all in alignment with the budget presentation you provided.
Yeah, that was the main part of that, right?
Councilor Travers, Councilor.
More generic, not really, again, and we're gonna get it in it. I would like us this sort of next year, from observing finance but not having been in it, a lot of reclassifications come to the board, which if the budget neutral seem not necessary to me. I expect you to do a really good job. But, so I just hope that, I see a lot of staff time and, energy and review by us when I don't even know how your office is staffed or what you need. So I just toss that out generically as something I hope when Catherine and all have a minute to read, then we can kind of look at that, because sometimes I feel awkward just because I really don't know how, I don't know how offices are staffed. I expect the department head to know that, or the program manager. And so sometimes they seem a little meaningless. And I don't know our protocol and what rules require them to come to us, but.
Yep.
I would suggest that we look at that.
Again, I totally agree, Councilor Carpenter, and actually, we are gonna have a meeting tentatively on June 28th. I have a subgroup of department heads who are gonna come together to talk about Board of Finance processes, our procedures, what we need to update. I mean, 2.5 months into this job, I see a lot of areas where we don't necessarily, obviously with council engagement, of course, in this process, but I see we're gonna talk about efficiencies. There's better ways to use all of our time, especially in a modern day city with the amount of things, the cost of things going up. And really, leaning on the professionalism of our offices. There's a threshold that seems too low on several of these items. So we'll be diving into that on the 28th and bringing that back to the Board of Finance and certainly council for that conversation. If you have ideas, please, I just said this to department heads this morning, open to all ideas, that includes division heads, staff, et cetera. If you think that it's absurd that we're still doing X, we would love to know that so we can update our processes.
You need to bring that up in your work.
That's quite all right.
All right, is there anything to item 4.2 before we move forward? I'm gonna ask for this motion to be read, and as they get a little bit longer, we'll curtail it, but are you ready, Councilor Carpenter? I see you think
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
I would move to approve and recommend that the city council eliminate the open, but unfilled IT project manager position, a regular full-time exempt non-union market factor position that was recently vacated by retirement. 2, to eliminate the open but unfilled technology support specialist position, a regular full-time union non-exempt market factor position. 3, create a new cybersecurity analyst position, a regular full-time non-union grade 19 exempt.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Kane. I will just make a note before we go to a vote. I haven't even mentioned this to you, Scott, but I was recently at an event with Champlain College and they have a whole evolving, I'm sure you know this, but just for folks in the board to know, cybersecurity department that's really evolving and they're doing lots of great partnerships all over the city and the region. And I said, the city would love to have a little conversation.
Absolutely.
About some great partnership and apprenticeships and partnering with the students there. They're doing a lot specifically on cybersecurity, which I'm excited.
Great. Excellent. Okay.
I'll make that connection.
Yeah,
More
definitely.
formally.
Throw that my way.
All right, great. Any other further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, moving right along, we dive into DPW. So item 4.3, it's a proposed DPW road technician 1 and 2, working foreperson, and 1 and 2 upward tiering. Chapin,
Great.
you want to kick us off here? And this is probably going to be one of the first motions for that we'll sort of figure out how we want to curtail and update and transparent as possibly as we can.
I recommend I move as proposed.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Chapin, take it away.
Great. Really appreciate it. I am joined today by Tony Berry, our HR manager for TDPW, and also Nate Lavery, who is on here and could be promoted. He is our street maintenance manager. Lee Perry is out of town. So I'm really excited to be here for these next 3 items. These are 3 reclassifications, 2 of which are the new proposal for departments outside of the ED, which is to bring a concept of upward tiering to our teams, which allows people in positions to be able to grow and develop and be recognized for that growth without having to wait for a position to open up. And that not only benefits the employee on the side of being able to initiate their development and get recognized for it, but also helps the city in terms of getting added value out of our talented workforce at the same time. So we did not include in the memo, thanks to Councilor Busher, flag the financial implications of this first upward tiering in the street maintenance team. And I can summarize that for you all here. The memo well describes the street maintenance team that would have both the field technicians and the working floor people have this 2-tiered opportunity in this upward tiering approach. If 75% of our staff get classified up in tier 2 of our field techs, and all of our working 4 people, which is our estimate of what would happen if approved tonight, the impact would be around $52,000. How would we pay for that? We are planning to reduce our FTE count in street maintenance by 3 people this year by transferring them over to the water division to do very specific water related work. The remaining people would have a higher billable earned revenue for the general fund than current. So these people become more billable, more focused, less drawn away by broader responsibilities. And that is how we're proposing to fund this. I am very pleased with the partnership with AFSCME. We have the president in the room, Colby Dallaire. Thank you for joining us. And Colby has been a real partner with the vice president, Steve Rollinger, in re-envisioning kind of how we can implement this in a way that works for staff and works for the city. So happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chapin. Questions or comments from the board? Classification. So exciting. Keep in point. Is there anything that Tony or Nate want to say? Just here for window dressing questions, I'm sure. Okay, great, looking good, okay. Well, I just want to say that I really appreciate sort of how much work went into this and really appreciate AFSCME leadership for being part of this. Just in the last few months, I've been impressed around how we can really move forward in a way that really strengthens partnership and respecting workers, but really leveling up the hard work that folks are doing and give people a pathway, not only to be valued, as Chapin was saying, but to be able to grow in these positions as city employees. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to note that. Go to the vote. I think we're going to the vote, unless anyone has anything else to say. All right, we're going to the vote. And I think there was a recommendation by Eric to put the motion against.
Say I move as proposed or I move the staff recommendation.
Okay, so would anyone like to make that kind of motion? Sarah? Council Kermit.
I will move the staff recommendation.
Okay, is there a second? Second by Councilor Kane. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next one, item 4.4, which is a reclassification of one DPW position as a technical service position. Introduce yourself for all the.
I am Laura Wheelock, City Engineer and Division Director of Technical Services. So the position that we are looking to have reclassified today is our financial person, as we kindly refer to this position. Currently, most divisions have their own kind of niche person. Our person requires a little bit of a redescription. The position has been vacant for a year. It was a position where the person had grown into it for a long period of time and took on a lot of different duties and also adapted as the city had different audit findings. And so as we went to seek to rehire this position, we found that it wasn't very marketable as described, and even as described, it really didn't fit our needs as we kind of pair ourselves with CTLs. So we are looking to redescribe it so that we can hopefully find someone to fill it. Also not mentioned in this one is the financials. It is neutral for our department as we have proposed our FY20 budget. And we are also open to, as the our employee. You have efficiency study. There we go. I wasn't around at the time that was involved our group. As the efficiency study comes through, if this position better fits within a different department based on organizational strategies, more than open to see how that changes. But at the moment, it lives with us.
Any questions or comments by the board? Fun tonight, everybody. Okay. Laura, I do appreciate your last comment because I am curious around how to make things more efficient and bring accounting in line with one office. So we'll see how things transpire. The operational efficiency study was expected today. We're expecting it tomorrow morning. We have been constantly talking about this all day long, so it's coming soon. So stay tuned. All right, if there's no further discussion on this item, I will look for a motion, which again, full permission to use the short version as we head into the deeper, longer motions. You want to have Eric repeat it again, or you got it?
I would move and recommend the city council approve the motion as proposed by staff.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Councilor Kane, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to the next item, item 4.5, which is a water resources wastewater personnel reorg, the various roles. Megan, want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Vivian Moyer, Division Director for Water Resources, and Matt Dow, and if wastewater wants to come up as well.
It's not even here yet.
Did a lot of work.
Well, I know you've been here in the past. You want to introduce yourself for all the
Sure, Matt Dow, wastewater facilities manager for City of Burlington.
things we did.
Yeah, so this is really a follow-up to our FY25 budget. I did put the link to the budget and the slides in the memo so that you could remember that I had in fact talked about all of this, probably too quickly. And so this is the wastewater portion of the staffing resiliency nugget that was put in the FY25 budget. And there's been a number of drivers around this. I would say one was a reclassification request by main wastewater plant operators, which we worked with the union over a long period of time to try to figure out how to do that best. And once tiering became available, that was really the best way to achieve what the staff were saying about there being sort of a higher level, higher tier, if you will, of certifications and knowledge necessary. The other piece which Chapin alluded to was the transfer of 3 street maintenance workers from DPW street maintenance to the wastewater team. And that's to better align their duties and get them entirely and completely focused on the collection system. Right now, that service is provided by streets. We do pay streets for that. And so some of the cost in here is offset by the fact that we are not paying streets for that function. However, because of the general fund budget pressures, we did work with streets to increase their overall amount of billable work so that the general fund wasn't being hurt by this sort of realignment of function. And so at the end of the day, I think we were ending up paying a little bit more, but what we're getting from that by having the staff fully within our house and being able to fully align them with the regulatory compliance thing is now we're able to give more money to streets so that they can pour more effort into fixing the things, which is what they're really, really good at, is fixing catch basins, fixing pipes, and so on and so forth. And then the last piece is, sort of an ongoing theme that Chapin and I have been working on about right-sizing management within water resources. Water resources is a big division, manages 3 enterprise funds, and I will admit and be vulnerable, being its leader is extremely, extremely hard and challenging because we're constantly dealing with 24/7 operations and things breaking because of past decisions made while trying to move the ball forward. And both me as well as my next level managers such as Matt, we want to do the work, we're passionate about the work, but it's really, really hard when we don't have enough capacity at that higher level. So I sort of went to a dark place last fall, did a lot of studying of other people's org charts, looked at BED's org charts, and really saw that in other operational systems, they do have additional layers of management and leadership, which I believe allows them to have people who are focused on innovation and strategy and continuous improvement while having a tier of people who are fully capable to put out the fires. I liken it to the metaphor of you need the people to put out the fires, but the rest of us, we need to be putting in smoke detectors so we don't have fires anymore. And right now we're just kind of in the firefighting game. And so that's big picture. I've tried to lay that out throughout the whole memo. To answer Sharon Busher's question, functionally, it's an increase of 1 to the DPW team, but an increase of 4 to the wastewater team because of that transfer. And if there's any specific details or numbers or calculations you want me to run so that you can help encourage other counselors to support this proposal, should you choose to support it, I would be happy to do so. Anything else?
It's good.
I should cry.
Okay, any questions or comments by the board?
Just to clarify, so citywide, the increase of 1 management position?
Yes, citywide, and there.
I mean, citywide, but department.
Yes, and I did allude to, like, I am coming back for a couple of other things that I talked about in my budget. So this is, I have not done, but this was the big the big one that we wanted to get off of our plates, and also because the union has been so patient in working with us on this reclassification request.
Questions, comments? Travers, and then Dr. Gilson.
Just curious, in terms of the three street maintenance FTEs that are being moved over into water resources. Are there incumbents already in these positions? Are they being moved over? How are you figuring out who's moving over into water resources, who's staying with street maintenance, who's taking on the seems like perhaps somewhat more complex roles here in water resources? Just curious what thinking and thought has gone into that process.
A lot of thinking and thought. I think we still need to sit down and make sure we're all on the same page, but generally speaking, there are there's at least one individual who is already sort of internally specialized in this. And as we know, is interested in making this move, and then another person. But I believe we're going to sort of post it, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is not set in stone, ask me, this is just my thinking. You know, post it internally in paper for the street maintenance work group. Probably ask for some letter of interest or intent. If there's only 3 people, then that would be easy peasy. If there's more than 3 people, then we would have to go through some sort of process to evaluate who the best 3 people or the most qualified, and seniority would absolutely play a role in that.
Two divisions of DPW and the union will get together to hash out a very simple process in which it's voluntary and encouraging people who want to specialize in this area to transfer over. But I'm confident that we'll be able to navigate that. We've had some good conversations with staff today. I expect that to continue.
Okay, and then just as a follow-up question to that, is there still an expectation that the street maintenance, now the tiered roles that we just approved here, will be able to also perform water resources work and vice versa, even though these roles of water resources are more complex, that they perhaps would also still have some responsibilities that currently exist within the street maintenance? I guess the overall question here is I want to make sure that we still have the capabilities and capacity to meet your street maintenance requirements.
Yes, indeed. Plowing is one that was a non-starter from the get-go. We need people to provide service so their streets can be safe, emergency services can get through. And the agreement for allowing this really is predicated on written commitment that these positions in the winter, their ability to be pulled into plowing is primary. So regardless of what may be signed up for the day, if plowing is the need, these folks in water resources, similar to currently, we have 6 people in water resources underneath the CBA who can come over to plow. Our lines are fairly permeable in our 4 divisions in DPW to get the job done. Streets will still do the construction work for water resources on the collection system, catch basin replacement, sewer main repair replacement. That is happening and that will continue to happen. This collection maintenance is more around cleaning of the mains and doing camera work in the mains. That work is transferring over, but the heavy construction remains in the street division.
Thank you.
I'm assuming this reorg and what you're proposing are all embedded in the rates that you proposed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And there's probably even the numbers I presented here, like I don't believe when I came up with these numbers that I counted or estimated how much these workers might be used by street maintenance for plowing, which would then kind of offset what the impact is, just because I don't know and I'd rather carry the full amount, and who knows what's gonna happen with snow. I'm sure it's gonna snow everywhere. If it doesn't, then, you know, we have things for them to do in the winter time. Absolutely, but generally speaking, our busiest season is gonna be in the non-winter, because that's when you can run the cameras and the actors most easily.
Cost allocation happens quite well within our department. If someone is plowing and they work for water, the general fund's paying for it. So that water is not having to pay the stranded costs of plowing, which is a general fund function.
You could argue that snow is.
Yeah.
Stormwater management. Not yet, the general questions talking.
When the Jennifer.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
And I just want, the tiering is so exciting. I'm just, it's been something we've been talking about for a long time. And to see it move forward is like, I'm so excited about it for our staff, and for our overall resiliency that, you know, there might have been people who would have left because the person above them wasn't leaving or anytime soon. And so where are they gonna go? And they can get snagged up by any number of folks because people know our folks are trained. We've seen the worst of the worst and been through it and back. And so just want to give another shout out and deep appreciation to ASME leadership on working with us on that.
Just one thing to add to that, I've been a wastewater operator for almost 20 years. I've worked at 4 different plants. Most wastewater plants in Vermont have some sort of it might not necessarily be tiering, but it's some sort of compensation for having a higher grade license. So wastewater, to be able to do operations, you have to hold a state issued license. There are 5 grades. So obviously the higher, with the higher the grade level you go, basically the more knowledge you have in wastewater, the higher, more ability you have to help out and raise more than just the basic. Since I've came up in Burlington from an operator, and back when I first came here, it was one of those things that I said, hey, it was missing. So it's just really nice to see that something that we can work with the union on and try to push through, to kind of get us so that we're actually meeting up with the rest of wastewater world.
Perspective. Anything else from the board or from staff? Then we are not reading this one. It's executive order from the mayor, so we're not going to read it, but I would welcome a short version of the motion.
I'll move to recommend contingent upon the approval of the FY25 wastewater and stormwater budgets that we approve the staff recommendation as presented.
That's a beautiful motion, Councilor Carpenter. First, Councilor Kane. Thank you. Any further discussion on this item before we vote? Second motion.
Yep, number 2. I need a budget amendment.
All right, let's do the first motion. Okay, that starts with to approve the recommended council authorize.
Yeah.
Very well. Okay, so the first motion as made by Councilor Carpenter, seconded by Councilor Kane. Any discussion on that item, which are the reclassification? 12 to 15. Seeing none, I will call vote. All in favor of the first motion, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. On to the second motion, Councilor Carpenter.
I move to approve and recommend the city council authorize the chief administrative officer to approve budget neutral amendments to the FY25 wastewater stormwater budgets to move the budgeted amounts from salaries, wages, total compensation, contingency lines 480, 19, 425, 000.5000 -910 and 245 -19 -000.5 -290 to the appropriate personal and benefits expense lines as needed to implement the above actions.
I appreciate that, Councilor Carpenter. Is there a second? Councilor Kane, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, team. Appreciate it.
We're under right too.
We're going to move on to our next item. Item 4.6, which is an authorization for
Read that one. The other big one.
$886,920 step 3 loan from the Vermont Clean Water State Revolving Fund and for $2 million in change amended engineering contract with Wright-Pierce for the stage 0 upgrade of the city's 3 wastewater treatment plants, Department of Public Works and Water Resources.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Martin Lee, engineering manager with Water Resources. So this is the Headworks improvement project. The Headworks is the wastewater plants. It's where we have large screening equipment and removal equipment. This project also includes some other equipment in the areas like large, they're called gates. And so they're pretty big pieces of equipment and part of the project cost as well. That overall project is what we're going for loan. We want the loan, Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan application approval for $12.8 million for the overall cost. And that's an estimate at this point because we don't have a bid in yet. We do have a draft engineering services agreement for just over $1 million or $1,081,420 that we're seeking approval for as well. I think that's the gist of this request. One other important note is that this is work that can happen regardless of what kind of improvements we select in the future, because this is important work, but we know there's more work to come, and we want to make sure we're picking the right project. So this one was carefully selected because it has to happen no matter what we need to do at our wastewater plants in the future.
And it was, thank you, Martin, within sort of the ballpark of the remaining bond money that we have. There is some still money, as one of the sections we wrote indicates, but that money we're needing to keep somewhat flexible for some other projects for which we've received ARPA grant funds and have to be built by a certain amount of time. So this project lined up with sort of where we're standing on our balance.
Questions or comments from the board? Mr. Jeffers?
I'm just curious, you talk about 62 cents per 100 cubic feet rate increase in FY27. What does that translate to sort of for, well, I'm just curious, I don't know, how many 100 cubic feet do I use every year?
So the median or average user is 400 cubic feet a month. The challenge is, and with our new rate structure, it's hard for me to really calculate exactly what the rate increase is going to be because we have a fixed charge and a volumetric charge, and one could argue that this debt service, it could be part of the fixed rate. So I just sort of went ahead and put it on the volumetric rate here just to be able to give you some idea, but there's a number of different dials we can turn to figure out also which type of customer it impacts, because we now have residential rates and commercial rates and so on and so forth. So, yes, generally you use 400 cubic feet a month. That's not the only part of your charge. You also pay a fee, a fixed fee based on your meter size. It's nice that we have that service retiring though. That up and I was excited. Even though it's not very much.
That's always very little. That makes this one very happy. Anything else, Councilor Jeffers?
I mean, I think it's a part of a bigger question, not necessarily for right now, but I know that this is part of a larger upgrade, stage 0 on there. Yeah. And you know, you mentioned in the memo that you provided that the overall cost of stages 0 through 3, I believe, will be fairly substantial, and would be curious at some point to get sort of an update whenever it's ready as to where that comprehensive plan stands.
Absolutely, and I think even before this debt service comes on board, because it'll with SRF loans, you only start paying on it 1 year after you've completed the project, which is different than when we go out and buy revenue bonds and start paying immediately, which is one of the things we're just trying to be really smart about. We're going to be talking extensively about the big money and also about enhancements to our affordability program that hopefully would even be in place to help deal with this particular rate impact. But I hear you, and I am eager to give you updates sooner rather than later on what that big number is looking like.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, then I think we're ready for a motion. Does anyone want to give Council Carpenter a break?
I'll move it. I lost my place.
I have 4 points, the short one.
Recommend that the city council approve the attached resolution.
There a second? Well, you were short. All right, Council Carpenter seconds. Is there any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Great, thank you very much. Thank you. All right.
Flush your toilets with clean tonight.
You're nice.
Moving right along.
You're almost done with it.
Item
Okay.
So.
4.7. Item 4.7 is related to Vermont Gas Systems franchise agreement. W is our lead department again, so Chief, away.
Yes, I'm going to turn to Laura. We also have Caleb Manna, who was our excavation inspector, who is soon turning into our associate public works engineer. Excited to have him in that. So Laura and Caleb.
I'm actually gonna let Caleb take first stab at this.
Yes, thank you. Can you all hear me all right?
Yep.
Great, yeah, sorry I couldn't be there in person tonight. But just to summarize, DPW is requesting a new agreement with Vermont Gas Systems. There was a 30-year prior franchise agreement in place between the city and the gas company. Quickly, franchise agreements are similar to leases. They're for for-profit entities having infrastructure in public right-of-ways. They assign important maintenance rights and responsibility rights, as well as rights to access the streets to repair their infrastructure. So we have found ourselves in a unique opportunity. These agreements don't expire too often, and we don't get too many shots at creating new ones and renegotiating these. So we're proposing a 5-year term in substantially the same form and with greater financial benefit to the city and the general fund specifically. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Caleb. And I'll just start by saying that I appreciate the staff's work on this. This was something that came on my desk pretty early on in my administration. And I also appreciate the ability to have a 5-year agreement. I think that's important for the city as we move forward with doing a little bit more deeper analysis on user fees, which the CAO has mentioned is be part of our upcoming work to make sure that we are doing right by city right-of-ways and leveraging what we can in general for franchise fees. So I just want to appreciate Eric also for your work on this as well. And Caleb and all the people who were involved. Are there questions or comments from the board on this item? Okay, good. All right.
I appreciate that this agreement has not been executed yet and may still be subject to further back and forth with Vermont Gas. Please tell me if this is a question that you can't answer in open session. But my question is specifically with respect to whether or not in the negotiations that you've had thus far with Vermont Gas, have they indicated that the 5-year term is acceptable to them?
Yes.
Okay, all right. That's my only question.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, if we're ready to vote, is there a motion?
The motion on this one, it didn't make it into the agenda, it
Okay.
is in the memo, so I could read it aloud and somebody could agree with that, or
I have it.
you have it. Okay, great.
I move to approve the franchise agreement between the city and Vermont Gas Systems, Inc. in order to execute a new agreement through June 30th, 2029, making use of the city right-of-way for utility infrastructure and annual payments of franchise fees as detailed in the agreement, and to recommend the mayor to execute the franchise agreement in substantial conformity with the agreement attached, subject to approval by the city attorney's office on behalf of the city of Burlington.
Thank you, Councilor Chavez. Is there a second? So Carpenter, seconds. Is there any further discussion on the item? Vote. Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank
You sure you don't want to stay, Jason?
I think you're probably done with me right now.
Ready to meet some new people. And have some folks, thanks for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Vicky. Appreciate it. Right, item 4.8, approving the issuance of a grant application note for the cost of certain airport improvement projects. I think there's Nick here and also says Susie, so.
Yes,
Are you
I
on
can,
the text?
yeah, I can start with this and then the airport team can come up because theirs is the next item. But this is a fairly easy one. If I could not show. This is a $10 million airport grant anticipation note. It is a renewal of the same item that we did last year. And Marie, please, I'm gonna turn it over to you in a minute so you can correct anything I may miss or have forgotten. The airport, as it turns out, has 23 grants from the Federal Aviation Administration. That surprised even me, but it's in the memo, so I trust it must be correct. Plus 7 more coming, so all the times that they're in here, that really adds up. The FAA knows that because they're approving all of these grants, but they're not front loading the money, these are reimbursable grants, that we may need financing, so they allow for these grant anticipation notes as a part of their grants. All of the costs associated with borrowing are reimbursable, so we're not paying any money. Also, this borrowing is not backed by the full faith and credit of the city, it's backed by the grants themselves. So it's very low risk for the city. Did I miss anything, airport team?
You summarized that very well.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions?
I think it's my job.
Sorry.
Questions.
I'm just more curious, do we have a local provider that we issue these to or through? Just curious. Who buys these notes?
That is a great question. Who bought it?
We're using the Key Bank, which does all of the city banking, and they provide this courtesy for us to we're able to utilize them for this as well.
Okay, I've done them before and I just was curious. Fine.
Any other questions, or comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll take a motion. Want to move this one? It's short.
Okay, actually, it's in what did. This says. I move to recommend the city council approve the attached resolution.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Travers. Any further discussion on this item before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4.9, which is our last deliberative item. It's a very long title, but it is the request to execute a construction manager at risk contract with Element Earth Construction Incorporated for the project next, which is the North Concourse replacement project. There's more there to the title, but we'll pass it over to the airport to tell us what.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for having us. We are coming to you as a full city council next week to present this more in visual context and a broader overview of the aesthetics of this project. However, all of this is on btv.aero right now. In fact, you can take a 3-dimensional walkthrough of what we're calling Project Next, which, as the mayor said, is our North Terminal Replacement Project. Tonight, we're requesting 3 different things. One is to sign a contract with Engelberth Construction Company. The second is to receive an additional grant as part of our 23 plus grant applications to fund a large portion of this project, although not the largest portion, because we did receive approval for the $34 million portion of this grant back in March. And the final item requested tonight is a little bit out of the box grant thinking for us. So this is a brand new grant that we've never received before through the Northern Borders Regional Commission. This is specifically for sustainable mass timber projects. We don't know if we're actually going to get this grant. We are in the running for it. We've been accepted or nominated to apply for it. At the end of this month, we'll know if we have there's a quick turnaround on the signatures on that grant, which is why we're requesting authorization to accept that particular grant tonight and subsequently next week at City Council. This project is a 25,000 square foot addition to the north concourse of our building. It's critical for the success of the airport. It does eliminate 4 small current gates, some of which are limited in capacity with the size of aircraft that the airlines are requesting to park there. And it opens up a larger hold room with appropriate seats. If you've ever flown on American Airlines or United Airlines, you'll know that small hallway is not conducive to the size and the total number of operations going through that space. Larry, you want to talk a little bit about the sustainability portion of this?
Okay, sure. Thank you. All right. The first item that we constructed is a number of geothermal wells for heating and cooling, which is estimated about 50 right now. So we're doing, geothermal for heating and cooling, and we're also we're going to do solar panels on the roof, and we're also doing the mass timber. And we've also done cost benefit analysis to make sure this is really a benefit versus trucking in this timber versus having steel.
Yeah, that's perfect. When we talk about the aesthetics, not only are the mass timber portions of the building really gonna shine through this building, but the total cost of carbon that we're not going to be putting into the steel structure, but truly this mass timber, including the support beams. The financial piece of this is large. As you can see, the Engelbreth contract is a significant over $55 million contract. Engelbreth was one of 5 bidders on the project as we went through a construction manager at risk process. This is allowable through the FAA's process to make sure that we're able to work with Engelbreth very early in the projects to not only save time, but also funding of the project so they can incorporate their thoughts, their ideas to the actual design, so that we're not designing this full thing and then bringing in a contractor later on. We would not be at this stage if we did not do a construction manager at risk process. We would still be designing it, and we would probably going out to bid later in the fall, if not the winter, and not starting this project this year, most likely. Again, the $34 million was approved by City Council back in March. We're requesting with contingency $7.9 million additional FAA grant and a $1.8 million Northern Border Regional Mission potential grant funding. The remaining portion of this is either local funding because it's not eligible under FAA rules, which means it's essentially not available for public use or baggage. There's a portion of that both in the building as well as the utility space, and there is a 3rd floor to this building. That 3rd floor is going to be a new public amenity as well as new airport administration offices. The public amenity would be a conference room space, an event space that will overlook the airfield, including a patio that actually goes out onto the airfield for outdoor events, which thankfully was approved by the Transportation Security Administration to allow that to happen. If the final piece of the funding, as indicated in the memo, is called the Passenger Facility Charge Program. As you purchase tickets through the airport, a portion of that ticket, in fact, $4.50 on each leg of your ticket, gets essentially returned back to the airport. This is another federal program, and that PFC, Passenger Facility Charge, will also go towards this project to fulfill the remaining pieces of the funding.
No, you covered, that was pretty comprehensive. So is various, the majority as we lay out in the memo is the FAA funding that we are getting. And we're fortunate to have such good partners with the FAA to have this additional opportunity. We are hopeful with the timber grant to piece all of these things together for us.
PFC program and cover
The final funding piece that I'll just talk about, which is mentioned in the memo, we do have $16 million of remaining funding that was worked through what's called the Airport Improvement Airport Improvement Grant Program through the bipartisan infrastructure law bill. That $16 million, that is part, or excuse me, the 7.9 million is part of the 16 million. Therefore, we do have some contingency left over in case there's any missing pieces or changes in the rest of the design. We're hopeful to get shovels in the ground by the end of this summer. That's all I have for you today. It's an exciting project and will be a little bit more comprehensive at the city council meeting next week.
Always appreciate contingency funding budgets. Important in this day and age. Any questions or comments from the board?
Just on your extra, this would be meeting space, we could grant for meetings, obviously, when it's intended to do something like that.
That's right, yeah, there's gonna be a conference room which the airport commission would be utilizing. There'll be a large indoor meeting space, probably the size of this room, and then an outdoor patio space, either rentals, but it's also available to the public throughout the day if it's not rented. And one of the thought processes are our old observation tower. We get a lot of comments on that not being open to the public. So it's kind of bringing that observation tower back to the public side of things and would be available all the time.
I think we do with small children.
Yeah. Dad had a business with Minnesota. He didn't know what to do with the carpenter kids. He'd take us to the airport and watch the planes land on the lawn with no fence. Many years ago.
You can't do that. Pretty close though.
Any other comments or questions from the board? And then we have 3 actions to take as I'm seeing this. So we have a 1 contract and 2 grants. So would someone like to make a motion on the first item, which is the contract with the contractor, construction manager at risk estate, Engle Road construction contract. Anyone like to make that motion? Council Carpenter?
I move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the director of aviation to execute a construction management at risk contract Ingleworth Construction Inc. in the amount of up to $47,931,525 with 15% contingency totaling up to $55,121,253.80 as allowed by the grant for the construction of the project next North Concourse replacement project subject to unit approval by the city attorney's office.
Okay, thank you, Council Carpenter. Is there a second on the contract? Council Kane, thank you. It's a second. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. On to our second motion for the grant related to the FAA.
I would move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the director of aviation to execute an additional grant from the Federal Aviation Administration to accept an amount up to $6,922,436 with a 15% contingency totaling up to $7,968,140 as allowed under the grant for design, construction manager at risk, coordination, selection, pricing, construction inspection, construction of the North Concourse replacement project next, grant application. Subject to review by the city attorney office.
Thank you, Councilor Carpenter. I'd like to extend consent.
Yes,
Very specific. Is there a second on this second motion? Councilor Kane, thank you. Any further discussion? See none. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And on to our final motion of the evening, which is related to the Northern Borders Regional Commission grant. Is there a motion on that?
I would move to approve and recommend to the city council to accept and execute a Northern Borders Regional Commission grant in the amount of up to $1,778,800 for the utilization of domestic mass timber construction materials and construction of the North Concourse Replacement Project next, subject to review by the city attorney's office.
Thank you, Council Carpenter. Is there a second? Okay, Council Kane. Any further discussion? Seeing that, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Airport team.
Thank you very much.
And we are at the end of our deliberative agenda, so seeing no further business, I'm going to adjourn the Board of Finance at 6:37.
So item 4.10.
And there is one more item that is not on my printed version.
Because I think you have the draft
Cool.
and we moved.
Just want to say for one, we did move it on to deliberative.
Yes.
I didn't move it on to my, I have ended that. All right, are you ready? Say, oh,
We
chat.
are ready and
All right.
we have Director of Finance, Brad Kuchenberger, and this is his work, so I'd like to invite him up.
As Brad is coming up, you were so smart on Friday. I said I wanted this on deliberative because we really want to make sure that our monthly financial review is not just buried in the consent, especially the first one. So this is emphasis on the first one, at least during my administration and Brad's tenure here in the city. We're both newbies here together, and so wanted to have a chance to just show you what we've prepared. And ask, of course, for feedback. Doesn't have to be here in this moment about what you like to see. And then our plan is to have these indeed on a monthly basis. Please note that in July and August, our Board of Finance meetings are limited, so we'll see how that times with reporting. But that is our intention, is to bring this forward in a regular fashion. And Brad, did I give you enough of a leeway? And so
Absolutely.
here we go. At
For
first.
the introduction. Good evening. For the record, I'm Brad Kuchenberger, Director of Finance for the City of Burlington. So we prepared a monthly financial review for the budgetary period ending April 30th, 2024. And we've outlined this report as first, overall review of our revenues and expenditures through the month. We're providing certain benchmarks that we use internally to compare our revenues received, our expenses paid out, that the board could use to compare against and generate any sort of questions or observations, which myself or anybody else in my team would happily try to answer or dig into. So as of April 30th, we are projecting our revenue to be approximately $234,000 in surplus of our forecasted expenditures. So a tight forecasted budget coming into the end of fiscal 24, but still in the positive direction. We have also provided, I want to note that in these tables that we generate, there's some language or terminology or grouping of certain expenses or revenues that we wanted to offer a glossary to demystify some of that a little bit, and you'll see that on the second page of the report, which relates to kind of the larger table showing revenues and expenses. In addition to an overall city picture, we thought we would present the 5 largest department budgets. And so we have non-departmental police, fire, Burlington Parks and Recreation, and DPW. And what I've done is I've presented the revenues and expenses and some brief bullets outlining the most relevant to us information as we look at where we are within the current year and understanding the overall context of the finances moving forward. I don't know if you've all had a chance to review it to date, but this is, as the mayor said, a preliminary offering as to our monthly revenues, a bit on timing. So we are at June 17th, looking at the numbers at the end of April. That is a tad behind what I would consider a normal schedule to be. And as we move forward, we will, the city process is the monthly books are closed on the 15th of the following month. So the May numbers were closed on the 15th of June. We send all of those numbers out to the department heads in a fashion that I think everyone has become well accustomed to. And if certain sets of accounts are over or under budget by either 5 or 10%, depending, or $10,000, they have to provide comments. They have a week to provide comments. So I would say on a typical month, we'd be forwarding these reviews almost exactly a month in arrears. So May 30th, May numbers should come at the end of June. June numbers for the end of the fiscal year would come at the end of July and so on. So that would be I think the fastest turnaround that we could offer. So that's a note on timing, and I will leave it to any questions or further discussions and look forward to an iterative process to get you all the information that you're looking for so we can all make intelligent decisions throughout the fiscal year as it pertains to our budget.
Brad, are there questions or comments, early feedback? This first monthly review, at least in this monthly report, at least since April 2nd. That's okay.
Thanks. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the expenditures run ahead of the revenues during one of the fiscal year. So I'm wondering how that is paid for then, like the gap that at any given times does come from the unassigned fund.
Yeah, so we monitor our cash on hand every day. I get a report from one of the folks in my staff, an accountant, looks at all of our cash on a running basis. So there's always enough available cash flow to cover the outlay of expenditures. And as we move through the fiscal year, we receive our revenues, and it's really the end of the year audit and this time period, May, June, July, when a lot of folks in my staff, in my teams and other financial folks throughout the city, we account for the various fund balances or where things end up depending on certain parameters. But there's always cash in the bank to pay the bills, real money. We do cash flow analysis on a basis.
Is the cash flow because of, what's the major reason for that? Is it the June tax payment, or what's creating lag?
There's a number of things. There's June tax payments, there's hundreds of revenue line items. Some come in on a regular sort of monthly basis. Some our expenditures happen daily. Our big expenditures happen weekly for those folks who get paid weekly. And it's a constant churn of money in and out. So that's really why I think Councillor Kane was asking relative to how do we actually pay our bills with money. We have cash in the bank, but we have our budgeted revenues and expenditures that we.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, we're gonna end the year. You know, I'm just curious about what kind of accounts receivable we have. I mean, or revenue receivable, and I assume the June payment would be a big one, but I'm just curious what where the lags are.
And it might be interesting for us to provide like an overall kind of a big picture
Yeah.
summary of that. For this board, I know talking to the staff person who handles cash, May is one of our most cash poor months because the June property tax is the largest. And because we're coming up on the end of year expenses. So that's a time when she and Brad are like very carefully monitoring the cash. Whereas now that most people have paid their June taxes, like, we're rich again, you know, like we don't have those issues. But there are certainly seasonal items that affect that. And there are agreements worked out with the interfund transfers where, you know, we'll borrow money from the retirement fund, they'll borrow money from us, and that's all very well documented, and we can get you information about that.
Council President, any other questions or comments? Checks.
I think this report is great. Thank you very much for providing it. I don't really have much feedback in terms of its format. I have just a couple specific questions in looking at it. I'm curious if you can speak to why debt service is coming in so much higher than what was budgeted for FY24. I would think that that's one of those costs that we have pretty good sense heading into the fiscal year of what that debt service should be.
I'd have to get back to.
Okay, so, okay, I see that we budgeted for about 7 million and it looks like the projected expense is more like 8.7 million. And with a lot of debt service out there for FY25, not wanting to not run into issues again, just want to make sure that we're missing something here in the equation somehow.
Yeah, I'll get you more detail.
Okay, and then my other question is with respect to the regional programs budget. Yes, it looks like our year to date there is 2.7 million, but we're expecting to do another 1.2 million by year's end. I'm just curious about the timing around that. Was it planned that some of these regional program expenditures would not happen until the end of the fiscal year? I suppose to cut to the chase, my question is, I want to make sure that we're not just spending for the sake of spending. If we have this $1.2 million gap now with 2 months left and a $4 million budget, I'm wondering if there's any, as we look towards FY25, savings there in the regional program budget.
I maybe answer.
I can also answer a little bit.
Great, why don't you start?
It's just a mystery that I should say. It is an interesting budget, and as I talked about in the Marvelous Nights of May, it is a budget that I very much, because the mayor's office essentially oversees it, want to make sure it's much clearer around criteria for who gets funded, when they get funded, etc. It is something where it's informal, but there's a process where the folks who are granted money invoice the city, and some of it comes very late in the fiscal year. And I know Emma Allen, my former office assistant, was charged in sometimes tracking down invoices, make sure people who were allocated funds need to send the documentation. That seems to be, at least some of it is bottlenecking in this late portion of the fiscal year. It's something that we are definitely going to improve upon for next fiscal year, but I will say that's probably a piece of it, is that the actual documentation to cut checks for what are essentially grants for a lot of the nonprofits comes in later in the fiscal year. Just we track it down. I don't know if
that is great. I think one thing that Brad found while working with the mayor on the FY25 regional programs budget is there were a couple of line items that either hadn't been used or we wanted to reduce. And so we will go back through the FY24 budget and just see of that $1.23 million that's outstanding. Are we expecting invoices? Do we have them? Or is there some portion of that money that won't be spent?
To clarify, some of it does go directly to the clerk treasurer's office. For example, she's looking up why we pay the Chamber of Commerce, for example, for me the other day, and that's a membership fee, and then that gets billed by the profit. That isn't necessarily a grant. So, Councilor Ferguson.
Just an observation, having worked with a couple of nonprofits on it. We seem to own that budget, and it was a little disorganized, I guess. All good, well spent money. I don't think it's just sort of floating.
It's kind of like the miscellaneous kitchen drawer. So
Yeah.
if you're going through this knowledge of everything seems to just land in here, the random battery that you don't know what to do with,
Yeah.
and your pencils and your everything else, so. Yeah. Anything else, Councilor Shivers?
Just two other questions. One is, I know it's tight, but to the extent there is a surplus at the end of FY '24, where does that end up in FY '25? Does it go into the unassigned fund balances? Where does it sit? Where does it stay with FY '24? What happens?
Yeah, it stays in the FY '24 balance and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, on the process is those departments that have an available balance can request the use of that fund balance in the upcoming fiscal year. And then we collectively decide on whether or not that's achievable or reasonable or prudent.
Yes, any money that is not spent out of the FY '24 budget gets sort of like sucked back into the big scheme, it's just unspent, and so that would then count towards unspent expenses, and ultimately, if there was money left over, you know, this says, okay, we'll end with 200,000 to the good, yes, that 200,000 would then go to the unassigned fund balance. And as Brad is describing, in some past years for discrete items that were not completed in a year needed to be rolled over. I'm thinking about some specific consulting assignments in the planning department a couple of years ago. For REIB, the empowerment funds, we wrote into the budget resolution that we wanted to keep that money assigned and roll it into the next year. That is an option we have had. I have learned that that is a bit of a risky option because until you learn how FY '24 is truly going to close, you don't want to promise that we have leftover money from this current year into the next year.
Last point then I would add is that in addition to the individual who heard from public comment, we've heard separately, some of us on the council from the United Way with respect to the Working Bridges program, and to the extent anyone in human resources requested any of the surplus to be able to continue that program into FY '25. I think the cost is $26,000. Just like to voice my support for our considering that. It's granular in my points.
I appreciate that, and while we're here, I sent a note to Director Durkee just to remind me way back when we had this conversation around each department offering some level of savings, what was the logic there? Because I hear that. Supported, I'd like to find a way. Okay, anything else on this item? Seeing none, I think we don't have an action on this. Do we have an action on this? We don't have an action on this. So exciting. Brad, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And with that, no other items on our agenda. I will adjourn the Board of Finance at 6:55. Thank you.